Hi everybody, my name is Maryam Majidova. I represent Advisory Council on Youth. This is a co-management structure within the Youth Department of the Council of Europe. And what we do, we actually co-manage, co-design and co-decide on strategies and recommendations concerning youth policy in all Council of Europe member states. During this session, I'll give you more information on how Council of Europe works, especially how the Youth Department works and how decisions are made and how those decisions actually impact local activities that are being done, organized by youth organizations in the member states. So Advisory Council on Youth is one part of the co-management system. Advisory Council on Youth consists of 30 members coming from different international NGOs, national youth councils, and any other NGO which is not part of European Youth Forum. So in total, we are 30 members, and we have another counterpart, which is as CDAJ. They are responsible for governmental side of the co-management system. So what does actually CDAJ stands for is Steering Committee on Youth, and it's called European Steering Committee on Youth because it consists of Council of Europe member states. And there are around more than 40 members of the CDAJ because, as you may know, we have 46 member states in the Council of Europe. It used to be 47, but recently Russia left Council of Europe, and therefore it's 46. So 30 members of the Advisory Council on Youth and 46 members of Steering Committee on Youth. And together we build up a joint Council on Youth. So Joint Council on Youth meets twice a year, discusses the ongoing processes in Europe concerning youth. At the same time, Joint Council on Youth decides on the next strategy and also the priority of the Council of Europe youth sector. So what are the priorities of the Council of Europe youth sector? For that, I'm going to share my screen. We have in total 5 priorities, and those 5 priorities are revitalizing pluralistic democracy, young people's access to rights, living together in peaceful and inclusive societies, youth work, and intergovernmental cooperation on youth policy. So these are the strategic priorities for 22-25. And of course, as an Advisory Council on Youth and European Steering Committee on Youth, as a joint Council on Youth, we're going to decide in 2024-2025 for the next 4 years strategic priorities. But all these thematic priorities of the youth sector are described in the strategy, which can be found on the strategy page. And you can read strategy in different languages. As you may see, it has been translated in most of the Council of Europe member state languages. And for more information, you can just choose the language you'd like to read the strategy about. And you will understand more about the main priorities and each output under the priority. Then, if we look at the Joint Council on Youth, in the co-management structure, as I explained earlier, there is Advisory Council on Youth, there is European Steering Committee for Youth, and we too make up Joint Council on Youth. And every 8 member of the committees, like 8 members from the Advisory Council on Youth and 8 members from the European Steering Committee for Youth, make up the Programming Committee on Youth. So what is Programming Committee on Youth about? So again, because of the co-management system and democratic processes supported by Council of Europe, it had to be equal. So we have equal votes from 8 governmental representatives and equal votes from 8 non-governmental youth organizations. As Programming Committee on Youth, we meet twice a year, and we decide and monitor the program of the European Youth Foundation and European Youth Centers. As you may know, we have two European youth centers, one in Strasbourg and one in Budapest. There is a possibility to have another youth center in the future, but this is still being discussed, as the youth department has a very limited budget compared to all the departments in the Council of Europe. As you may imagine, youth is always the most vulnerable target and the most easy to influence, unfortunately. So we decided as a programming committee on study sessions, on trainings, on long-term projects and campaigns run by youth department and its partners. We decide on the financial aspect of the project. Obviously, as a programming committee on youth, we can vote on what could pass, what could not pass. In addition to that, if you look at the webpage of European Youth Foundation, we can understand that European Youth Foundation has a budget of approximately 3 million euros, which is not big for the foundation. Nevertheless, European Youth Foundation does support different activities run by youth organizations. And those activities are study sessions, those activities are international trainings, those activities are work plans, and the administrative costs of the youth organizations. So you can see it's annual work plan grant, international activity grant, pilot activity grant, structural grant. So annual work plan grant stands for the projects, activities run by one NGO throughout the year. It's a maximum of 50,000 euros allocated for the annual work plans. You can have statutory meetings, you can have different activities, and you can organize study sessions within your annual work plan. The next component, which is supported by European Youth Foundation, International Activity Grant. For this, we need to have at least 7 Council of Europe member states. If we call it international, it means that participants should represent at least 7 Council of Europe member states. And usually the other priority and the other requirement is that 75% of participants should be under 30 years old. Inclusive and gender priority should be taken into consideration. It has to be very gender sensitive and at the same time inclusive for participants to access it and participate in the program. And the maximum amount allocated for international activity is 20,000 euros. The next component supported by European Youth Foundation is pilot activity grant. So pilot activity is local actions, and this is the action supported, of course, by European Youth Foundation within the strategy 2030. And Youth Department also plays a crucial role in supporting local youth organizations in addressing democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And for pilot activities, we don't need to have an international partner, as you may see, we may understand that it's only concerning local action and local environment. And for grant amount, it's up until 15,000 euros. It used to be 10,000 euros in the past. Now, due to the huge demand by the Council of Europe member states and organizations, and huge interest actually in local actions compared to international activities, and it's much harder to organize. The Secretariat and the Programming Committee decided to raise it up until 15,000 euros. So local actions funded by European Youth Foundation is one of the most feasible and flexible way to actually do local activities within the Youth Department. So the next grant supported by European Youth Foundation is structural grant. So structural grant offers its funding for 2 consecutive years, and it's only accessible to international NGOs, an international network of youth NGOs, meaning that if any organization has already different members in countries across Europe. Only in that case they can apply to get the structural grant. And structural grant also covers the administrative costs. It covers some of the costs for the study sessions, and it has to be confirmed 1 year after the submission. So it takes some time actually to get the confirmation. And usually the maximum amount for 2 years is 50,000 euros. And here in the link below, you can actually click and see what are the criteria for the structural grants. And if you want to get more information about the granting process, you can actually check out those registration, application, deadlines, etc. But usually, if we talk about co-management structure, it's the PC, Programming Committee, which reviews the recommendations of the Secretariat, because as we are volunteers, we cannot review all the projects in details. So Secretariat of the Youth Department and the European Youth Foundation prepares a review, and we read that review, and then in case we have a feeling that we need to go through the project in details, we have access, as Programming Committee, we have access to all those budgets and all the descriptions of the project. And after we review the recommendation and also the project itself, we get back to the Secretariat with our votes, or we also can decide on the consortium. But most of the times we come to the consensus, but also we need to vote in the same process. So EYF, due to COVID-19, has experienced some distractions because it was really hard to organize sessions or activities in person. And therefore, the number of granted activities from the past years were less than the ones from 2019 or 2018 because of the uncertainty happening with COVID-19 situation. But overall, in those situations as well, as Programming Committee on Youth, we were meeting online, deciding on the processes and the deadlines, and working together with Secretariat in order to make sure that despite of the COVID uncertainty, we are still open for conducting some of the activities online. So this is in a nutshell about European Youth Foundation, and I would like to show you more information about actually the work of Advisory Council. For that, I'm going to share my screen. So as I said earlier, we have 30 members in the Advisory Council on Youth. And to get more information about the Advisory Council, you can go to Meet the AC. And on this website of the Youth Department, you can get to know our portfolios and reach out to us in case you need any information regarding the main priorities of the Council of Europe. So you can see that every Advisory Council on Youth has a portfolio. For example, Alice has transversal portfolios. She's focusing on Democracy Here, Democracy Now campaign. She's also in the Management Committee for Ukraine. Then we have Alexander. He's responsible for reporting on Roma issues. He is also responsible for relationship with Steering Committee for Education and implementation of the review of recommendation on the Roma youth, and at the same time, young people's access to rights. Then we have Gubas. He is lead for human rights education with young people, and he is second lead on work with the quality label for youth centers. So as you can see, for me, I'm a gender reporter. I represent both joint CDAJ and CCJ, meaning that CCJ is actually Advisory Council on Youth, and CDAJ is European Steering Committee on Youth. So I am the gender reporter, just like Alexandru. on the behalf of Joint Council on Youth, on the behalf of co-management system, not just the advisory council. It's a very specific situation where reporters, they represent both structures, not just one. And my lead is on access to rights, human rights education with young people. And the second lead is actually the inclusive and peaceful societies. But for my first and foremost responsibility is being a gender equality reporter. So then you can check out all other members of the Advisory Council on Youth. You may wondering why we have different letters, acronyms for the actual spelling and pronunciation in English, because since the Council of Europe is based in France, and before there was agreement early 80s that all the acronyms would actually be in French, not in English. So therefore you can see that it's not ESCY, but it's CDAJ. It's an Advisory Council on Youth like ACY, but it's CCJ. And it's CMJ instead of YCY because of the French acronyms. This is just the agreement that has been followed for years now. So another part of the co-management decisions that we make as Advisory Council on Youth and Steering Committee on Youth as a joint council is European Youth Centers. As you can see, there are 2 youth centers in Strasbourg. The budget of European Youth Centers, as well as study sessions to be organized there, or salaries of the staff, is also confirmed and decided by Joint Council on Youth. And actually this year, the Youth Department of the Council of Europe is celebrating its 50th anniversary. It's been 50 years since the establishment of Youth Department in 1972, and since then the Youth Department has been producing, working on a lot of outputs, especially those concerning the education part of the Youth Department, which is publications, guidelines, toolkits that support the work of educators and trainers across Europe. And if you look at the program part of the website, you can see the education and training, and there is as well training courses, study sessions, and then you can see trainers pool. Actually, in case you need a trainer, you can also request it on the website of the Council of Europe. Trainers pool, of course, according to the needs of your participants or the thematic priorities of your organization. And one of the main campaigns, which has been running since last year, is Democracy Here, Democracy Now. The purpose of this campaign was actually to revitalize the pluralistic democracy, since it has been in the past quite shrinking spaces for civil society in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, Spain, and other countries where there was a huge need to actually revitalize the understanding of democracy and make sure that everyone is participating in the decision-making process, including minorities. So we just had a Youth Action Week last summer in June in Strasbourg, and the purpose of the Youth Action Week was actually to mobilize young people and member states around the campaign. Even though it was really hard to bring Ukrainian participants, they were also present. And this is information in English. You can see that there is different social web pages. So if you really want to support the work of Advisory Council in this campaign, you can still do very small actions on youth participation or meaningful youth participation, on human rights education, with specific highlight on pluralistic democracy and youth access to rights. So all the information about the campaign you can find here. There are also tools if you would like to use some of them. There are flyers in English that you could use like a guideline for you to work on this campaign on the local level. And these are just small leaflets that you could also translate in case you want to translate it into your own language. This is in a nutshell what Advisory Council does, but of course there are very diverse portfolios, as you may see from the portfolios we were having on the website. We also work very closely with the Youth Department Secretariat, because as we all volunteers, it's really hard for us to follow the processes all the time. So therefore, we have Secretariat, which supports us. At the same time, we have counterparts we are working with in the European Youth Forum. For example, for the gender issues, there is one board member or Secretariat member, which we can also work together on different circumstances and conditions. For example, if we want to have a campaign, we work with the governmental representative, with the Secretariat, but also the board member or Secretariat of the European Youth Forum. So it's quite of a co-management structure that we are talking about here. Whatever is done is decided together. Whatever is designed is decided together. And this is the beauty of co-management, where young people feel included in the processes and feel like the meaningful participation is happening actually. Because sometimes young people are perceived as those who should only be concerned about policies related to them. But in the co-management structure, we actually try to prevent further discrimination, prevent further hate speech, and draft different recommendations concerning lives of people. Recommendation on youth access to rights, recommendation on Roma youth, and more recommendations which you can find also on our website. But all those recommendations to the Council of Europe member states is drafted together with Advisory Council on Youth and Steering Committee on Youth, which is Joint Council on Youth. And in the end, I would like to show a short video about the work of Advisory Council on Youth.
All right, Freedom to call Europe.
In order to get more information of the work on Advisory Council on Youth and the Joint Council on Youth, you can actually follow the two social media pages, the Youth Department of the Council of Europe and Advisory Council on Youth. We are present on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and please feel free to comment, share, and ask questions on the social media. We're also planning to have different webinars throughout our mandate, so you're also free to register to those webinars and get in touch with us online. And also, in order to be more aware about our work of the representation that we do with the PACE, the Parliamentary Assembly, the work we do with different intergovernmental organizations and also the member states. You can also follow us on social media for that.